Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a good time. My name is John Evans. I am the program chair for the California Historical Radio Society, and this is our first event away from the Basque Center at South City. What do you think about this new location? Yeah, we're really excited about it. We're going to be having our Hall of Fame induction ceremony in the same spot in October. And so we'll be talking about ticket sales here pretty soon. We have a great day today. This is Women's History Month, our second annual acknowledgement of Women's History Month and the role of women in television and radio here in the Bay Area. And we have the woman who was the very first woman to become a primetime news anchor here in the Bay Area, my friend and former radio co-anchor, Marcia Brandwin. Mickey Lookoff from KGO Radio. Fresca from KBLX and Coit. And Lady Ray from KMEL. And our host for today, Roberta Gonzalez. Thank you so much, Roberta. But before we get to that program, and we're going to hear from all of these people in just a moment, the executive director of the CHRS, California Historical Radio Society, is Rachel Lee. She is our leader, our mentor, and the brains behind what we do at the museum in Alameda, which are, if you haven't been to the Radio Museum, it's just across the Oakland Estuary in Alameda, a really quick drive from here. Here is Rachel Lee.
What if I told you that on the West Coast, the first DJ was a woman? Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. What an incredible room full of talent and history and energy. I'm Rachel Lee, the Executive Director of the California Historical Radio Society. We are the umbrella organization for the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame and broadcast legends who are putting on this event today. CHRS is an organization devoted to preserving and celebrating the rich legacy of broadcasting and electronic communication. And let me tell you, events like this, they matter. Too often, the stories of women in broadcasting, your stories go untold, but your impact is real. You've informed, entertained, broken barriers, and shaped public discourse across generations, beginning with Mrs. Doc Harold, the first female DJ, the first DJ. First DJ on the West Coast. And at CHRS, we believe those stories must be preserved and shared, not someday, but now. That's why we're working to build a museum and a cultural center that doesn't just showcase old radios or microphones, we do lots of that too, but brings to life the voices and innovation behind them, and that includes you. But we can't do this alone. We need volunteers, donors, and most importantly, partners like you. We need your time, your insight, your artifacts, your memories, and your professional expertise to help us get it right. Whether you're a pioneer or just getting started in the field, your perspective helps shape how future generations will understand the history of radio, electronic communications, broadcasting. We're not just preserving equipment, we're preserving experiences, milestones, glass ceiling breakers, and voices. We are preserving women's stories and the stories of the door openers and the allies, and we want all of you to be a part of that process. So I invite you, I urge you to visit us at CHRS. Come see what we're doing. Check out our many upcoming events, including monthly speaker events, the legendary station event honoring Keene this year, Barhoff nominations and Don Sherwood Awards, summer camps, field trips, and of course, Radio Day by the Bay. Come walk through the halls where history is being brought back to life and consider how you can help by giving, by volunteering, or simply by sharing your story. Because this work is too important to be done by a few. It requires a community. And today, looking around this room, I know we've got the right people. Thank you for what you've done and what you're about to do with us.
Thank you, Rachel. Before we get started, Belva Davis was a champion of television in this market. She was she's the queen of Bay Area television and radio, both, the KQED. And at some point during the program today, we're going to be talking to Rita Williams from Channel 2, retired reporter extraordinaire from Channel 2, because Belva has the scoop on a documentary being made about Belva, and they could use your help. So we'll get to that at some point. So let's get our program started. Roberta Gonzalez is a marathon runner. She's a swimmer. She knows Bay Area weather like no one else. And when she came to the market in 1996, she would come down to the KPIX radio studio where I was working and where Marcia and I were working together, and would do the weather down there. And she was there for maybe a day before Marcia left. So there was a lot of changes going on in those days, but she's gone on to do really big things in this market, and no one is more loved in Bay Area TV weather forecasting than Roberta Gonzalez. So give her a hand. She's a phenomenal woman. She's a mother of 2 great sons, and she's today's host of this program. So here's Roberta.
Thank you. Wow. I want to just sit down and come back up again. That was so nice. And I'm probably only a favorite now that Bill Martin has retired, right? Now, just to give a little bit of background really quickly here, because we could be here all day, and we know a lot of you want to see the Warriors play later. So when I was 11 years old, my mom and dad bought me my first tape recorder. And the way that they got that, we were from limited means, so they got it through blue chip stamps. And thank you very much, because so many people do not know what a blue chip stamp is. Malou, do you know what a blue chip stamp is? I don't think so. So when your parents would go to the gas station and they'd fill up with gas, the gas attendant would come out and clean the windows and fill up the tank, check the oil, right? And then he'd give them blue chip stamps according to how much gas you put in your car. So my parents had 40 books, and they bought me my first tape recorder from the blue chip stamp store. And that was for my 11th birthday, and I went around interviewing everybody all the time. I said I was going to be a reporter, and I was going to bring the news to the people. And that was my goal the rest of my life. Fast forward to I was 15 years old, and I was sweeping the floors at the local radio station for free. But we lived in the Mojave Desert, so there's a lot of dirt. It was a big job. I graduated from high school early at 17, and this is when we had the yellow pages. I was going through the phone book looking up all the TV and radio stations, and I went to this one radio station, and they brought me on as an intern to sit outside Tower Records and watch what people were buying. That was our music research. It was a big job. Meanwhile, I was studying for my 3rd-class radio license, because I said, I'm going to be on the air, because I'm going to bring the news to the people and the music. And then simultaneously, while I was going to school at San Diego State University on the Equal Opportunity Program, because I couldn't afford to go to school, I was hired at XCTV, Mexican Independent Television Station in San Diego, and I was hired as the gardener. And people said, you reported on gardens? No, I was the gardener. I'm Mexican, I was the gardener. I did, but my mom always told me, no matter what job you do it really well, better than anybody else. So then, being the gardener, I got promoted to the messenger, where the company car, and I'm not kidding you, was a 1950 Edsel. And I would take this Edsel across the border to Tijuana every single day, because being XETV, a Mexican-owned station in San Diego, we had to take the commercial spots, where these big reels of film, the commercial spots, and take them across the border to our transmitter site. I drop them off there, then I come back across the border, and I do my radio internship work, also at the TV station as, at that point, the messenger, and going to school at the same time. I didn't sleep, and we all still don't sleep to this day, do we? If we're working, we still don't sleep. So, but my mom always told me, again, be the best at what you can be. So I started hanging out in the film department because there was no newsroom at that TV station, and hanging out in the film department, I worked my way into a film editor position. And then I was hired across town at KGTV, the ABC affiliate, as assistant film director. So I used to edit the movies of the Monday night after Monday Night Football. That was my job. I'd edit the movie, where you actually had to splice the film and insert the commercials, right? So it was funny. This morning, actually, I was watching our news, and I messaged Betty Yu and Frank Malicote on the air, and I said, I see this reflection on the panel behind you. It shouldn't be there. And they both messaged me back going, oh my gosh, what eye you have? What are you talking about? I said, it's only over Betty's shoulder. And then Betty wrote back, oh, it's a reflection off my computer, the screen, onto the graphics behind her. So you still have that editor eye from all those days. But being in at KGTV and the ABC affiliate, they had news. So then they had this one program that came up called this was owned by McGraw-Hill. They had the Minority Reporter Trainee position, where you get a contract for 1 year as a minority, and then you have to forego your real job. So I thought, oh man, this is a gamble, because what if I don't get hired on after a year? Then I'm out, right? I'm out. But Mom said, do the best job ever, right? So I got that job as a reporter, and I was working at the zoo covering like the birth of a giraffe, when we got this call over the CB radio. Okay, I'm talking about 1980, and it's the first shooting I've ever had heard of. It was Huberty, and he was at a San Ysidro McDonald's, and it was a mass shooting. It was like one of the first mass shootings ever. And they said, you're the closest to San Ysidro, get there till the real reporter shows up. And so I did, and what I saw that day changed me for life. I decided, well, after I was ducking underneath the news car, I was saying, I don't know if I like seeing people die. You know, maybe I got to rethink this whole career. I mean, 21 people died that day, and they were children. So I get back to the newsroom, but even then it was really great. They brought in therapists to talk to us. I'm sitting there talking to a therapist, and all of a sudden our weathercaster has a massive heart attack. And so we film it, then we call 911, and then news director turns around and says, who's going to do my weather? And I thought, well, I don't know if I like this whole news thing after all. I'll do weather, I'll do it. So I got on the air that night, which is incredible, right? But somehow I learned, okay, this is know your states. Geography is really important. I got on the air and said, it's raining in Washington. No, this Washington. There's two. So I went back to school, started studying meteorology, thinking I'm loving weather, started sending tapes out all over the place, got hired in San Luis Obispo, started walking the fields with the farmers, taking pilot lessons, because your farmers and pilots are your best weather forecasters in the world. And I've been getting hired for weather ever since. So I was in San Jose, I think it was 1986, worked there for 3 years, then went to Chicago, chased tornadoes, then been back here since 1996 now, and I love me some weather. I mean, the first thing I saw when I came up here today, fog is cleared, sun is out, only briefly, low pressure's coming back in. By tomorrow night, you got rain in your forecast for your morning commute Monday. So we'll give you more details on that coming up. But the reason why we're here, it's not about me. It's about our beautiful guests here today. But one thing I wanted to say, I was interviewed just a couple of days ago, and somebody said, who was your mentor when you first started off? Well, it would be these people here because, well, you're a little too young. But I got to tell you something. When I first started off, I was told I was the only first Latina meteorologist in the country. So I didn't have anybody to try to emulate. My mom said, well, that Jane Pauley lady, she's pretty classy. Why don't you try to, kind of think about her when you're doing the weather. So I try to keep her finesse, up. And so I'm going to be interested in hear who your mentors were or are still today. And since I'm closest to Marsha Brandwood here, which is true, we worked together for a day. But she's a legend, so I know of her, and I feel like I know her very well. So Marsha, my first question to you is, from the time you started to today, what do you think has been the biggest change in the industry or for you?
Wow. Well, it's very hard for me to say that there's been the biggest change. Of course, there are women all over. Is this okay? There are women now on every station. There are reporters. You find women everywhere.
But you were the first.
I was the first here in the Bay Area. There were 4 of us in the country. Myself, Connie Chung, a woman named Jessica Savage in Philadelphia, and Jane Pauley in Chicago. And we were the 4 women, the first women to ever become anchors in the country.
Did you feel at that time that was a huge responsibility? Were you aware of it?
I was totally aware of it, and I was very inexperienced. I had been on, some of you older people might remember a show called Newsroom on KQED. I had my training there. But I would say that being the first, I have always felt like I was a role model in a lot of areas. And I'm still a role model because I'm 82 years old today, and I went back to school.
Yes.
Nothing to clap at. You're not going to like it when you get there. But when my husband died, and I thought, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I thought, I can't not work. I can't not somehow be somebody who has vision or a sense of purpose, meaning, all of the stuff that you hear now that's spouted about life. And so I went back to school at 70, and I became I got my clinical psychology degree, a master's, and now I am a therapist, psychotherapist with a very good practice dealing with couples therapy. So what I've learned about life is you just got to keep rolling and moving and not allowing the age to make you feel as if you're not purposeful and meaningful. But I will say this, and I'm a little sad about the news now, because in our audience is she was Valerie Coleman to me, Valerie Morris, who had an absolutely stellar career in television anchoring. We worked together at KGO. We worked as women so hard to be role models, smart, real reporters. We wrote all our news. We reported out in the field. We were avid readers. We always felt we had to be, if we could have gone to the network, we would have been prepared because we were prepared. And now I kind of look at television, local news, and even all the outlets, and I see women going back to having to wear low-cut outfits, and their hair has to be long. And I don't see the intelligence that we bring, or even the content that we brought in those days. So I think that when I tell you what is the difference, we had a moment in time when Barbara Walters became the first anchor on a network show, and she was treated so poorly by Harry Reasoner. And all of us at that time, all the women anchors and all the women reporters rallied behind her. She made a huge difference. She became, as you know, so famous and such a great reporter. She was really a great reporter in her own way. But I just feel now that it's, news has sort of taken a back seat. It's become, with the loss of the fairness doctrine, which was, in our time, you never had an opinion. You had to tell what the facts were, and you believed that the American people were smart enough to look at the facts and make a decision for themselves. Now we have CNN, we have MSNBC. Fox was the worst, in my view. Sorry for those of you who voted the other way. And I feel that Fox really changed the way, and Murdoch really changed the way news is delivered in this country. I worked in LA at a station called KTTV, Metro Media. It was a wonderful station. I was the news director and the principal anchor there. And that station was bought by Murdoch. And the first week that Murdoch came in and bought that station, he came to our station, came into the news, and he said, I need you to do a story about a show that we're having with Maury Povich from Australia. He said, I need you to do it as a news story. So in other words, he wanted a promo as a news story. I said, I don't do that. He said, oh, yes, you do. I said, no, I don't do that. If you want to do that, I will have to leave the station. A week later, I was gone. So that was the beginning. Murdoch is the real creep that started what has happened to the news business.
I just want to clarify, that Fox News is not our Fox Local.
No.
No, it isn't. That's why we're even changing some of our slogans coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're Fox Local, KTVU.
Yeah.
We're not. I interviewed somebody really recently, and then a couple of days later, he actually came to my house and knocked on my door and said, I feel dirty. I didn't know you were with Fox. I thought you were with another station. But he felt dirty,
Yeah.
and I had to sympathize with that. I had to really feel that. And it's true. So I want to ask now, Mickey. Mickey's in the house here. Thank you so much. This is a man who has fought for women's rights for as long as I know of, and I'm going back to first working here in the 80s. But Mickey, I want to ask you just something that has always troubled a lot of us women here. Men can age on television. Women cannot. Men get more distinguished. Women just get old. Why is that?
No pressure, no pressure.
That's not my field.
You worked at KGO. I'm sure you had to hear it a lot of the times. You know, like Bill Martin could go out there with this brilliant, bush of beautiful gray hair, but don't I dare have one on TV, or I get called out on that.
Well, we had one beautiful news anchor. As a matter of fact, she's the same woman who coerced me to being here today. She always looked good, and she looks just as good today, and that's Rosie Allen.
I know you have done a lot for women in this industry. Tell us a little bit about your background for
Well, my background is I majored in broadcasting, speech, radio, and television, and so I've been in it for a long, long time. Matter of fact, 67 years ago, I started in broadcasting. And it's been a great career. And I'll just tell you that I actually grew up in the media type of surroundings. When I was very, very young, my brother always had the radio on, and I was always fascinated. I listened to kids' programs, Breakfast Club, Marching Around the Table, and all that sort of thing. And then I first heard about something called television. And that's the one with the pictures. And I asked my older brother, who was very sophisticated, I said, well, where do you get this television? How do you get it? And he says, well, it's a certain frequency, and you just have to find the frequency. Well, I spent hours taking my little radio, turning that dial, hoping that a picture would suddenly evolve. That's how long ago I've been part of this industry. But I did want to tell one story, because very, very often we in the news world are told about how corporations control the news. And this particular one was one that I was very, very pleased about. It's about 25 years ago now, we were owned by Disney. KGO was owned by Disney. That's the third of 4 companies I ran KGO for. And I got a call sitting in my office at 6:30 at night, and the head legal person for ABC called me and said, Mickey, did you just run a story about Disney on KGO? I said, matter of fact, we did. She said, where did it come from? I said, it was a Reuters story. And she said, no, it couldn't have been Reuters. I said, yeah, it was. She said, well, would you mind checking for me? And this is a woman I had the highest respect for. And so I went down to the newsroom and I ripped off the story, called her back, and I said, I have it in front of me. It's a Reuters story about Disney. And she says, well, Mickey, in the future, I said, you don't want to say another word. You want to stop this conversation right now. She said, would you forget that I ever called? And I just thought that was fabulous. I've never forgotten that. And but that's the way it was. I mean, operating KGO was in that way a pleasure, because I never, except for spending too much money, I never got any pressure from the corporation. We had the most expensive radio station ABC ever ran, and but we had good results with it, and so I was always able to defend it.
Well, you were #1 during that time as well. And KGO, where are they today?
Gone.
Yes, exactly. Well, maybe she was trying to call the other Mickey, if she was from Disney, right?
I used to write Bob Iger.
Ba-dum-bum.
I used to write Bob Iger every year and say, I'm Mickey from Disney.
Thank you very much. And remember, I want you to start thinking. I'm going to open it up for questions here after our final panelists here, okay? Because I know you're just sitting on your hands right now, ready to raise them up. Fresca, you have been a Bay Area staple for many years. And I believe you are at 2 radio stations, aren't you? Don't you do morning at one and middays at another?
Yes.
How do you do it all? And how long have you been doing radio here in the Bay Area?
I've been doing radio here in the Bay for about 30 plus years. So I started in 1993.
When you were 3.
And so I'm 50, I'll be 52 this year. So, but yeah, I mean, I started back in 1993 and it's changed so much, you know. And, you know, I'm doing 2 stations. When I started doing mornings, they asked me to not do the other stations that I was doing radio imaging for. And I was also personality doing other stations. I was on 7 stations. And then they asked me, okay, well, if we're going to do mornings with us, then we're going to have to ask, well, we would like for you to see if you could just kind of turn it down to like 2 so we can keep you focused. I was like, okay, this lady here, she's doing 13, but she'll tell you later how she does 13 stations every day. Yeah. So, so I've been in the Bay for that long. I started out as a mobile DJ. I'm from Daly City. There's just a bunch of them there. and then I got into production, and I wanted to produce music. So I started, like many Filipinos, playing piano when I was 3, and I had private lessons for like 10 years, and thought I could sing, and I could play all these different instruments, and played at the Monterey Jazz Festival as a teen. But there was a panel that was, it was at the Dunphy Hotel. Do you guys remember the Dunphy Hotel? So it was at the Dunphy, and there was a panel of women, I want to say women in radio, and that was like my start in really kind of delving into radio. I never thought that I would be a personality, although I like to talk a lot, and my teachers in school used to always put my desk in a corner, say, don't talk to Frances, because that's my real name. Don't talk to Frances, she's going to, you know, talk your ear off, and now I get paid to talk, which is kind of ironic, because my parents never wanted me to do that. They're, you know, my parents are immigrants from the Philippines, and you know, they're like, we want to give you a better life, and they're like, you want to do music? It was really, really rough. Then I got my first break at Wild 107, and I was doing radio research there, and just calling phone books, hoping people wouldn't hang up on me, because we have a whole hook tape of like 30 songs for them to listen to. You like this song? You like this song? How about this song? Oh, please don't hang up. You like this song? And then I ended up becoming an intern for the programming department, production as well. I was also dumping garbage, doing all that stuff, answering the front phones, and you know, doing whatever we can to stay in the business. And then I finally ended up in Hawaii. So that was my first time being a radio personality. Was there for 3 years, came back to the Bay Area, and then I was at Wild 94.9 for about 6 years, just doing weekends for a long time, because I was trying to finish school. Then ended up doing mornings in Sacramento. I was also on TV for the Filipino music, Filipino music channel, the Filipino, oh my God, TFC, the Filipino
TFC,
channel,
that's what it
Filipino
is.
channel.
The
Yeah,
Filipino channel.
yeah, exactly. So I was doing that, and it was interesting because I was on TV, but the producers were telling the United States producers, so the producers in the Philippines were telling them here, because we were the first like American production. And they said, your host is too dark. Fresca's too dark. We should probably change her out. And I got so angry, and I told my makeup artist to, like, do you have any darker foundation in there? Like, just, we're island people, you know? Like, I'm very proud to be, you know, brown. And, you know, so that was interesting to get that from my people. But, you know, we persevered through that. And then, you know, now I'm on, 2 stations doing mornings at KBLX, and I do middays on 96.5 KOIT. I've been there for a little while, so I really love it. I see some people here that I have really tried to emulate, actually, over the years, and have found to be mentors for myself, like Sue Hall, Miranda, and I don't know if I see Malou in the back there. I actually interned for her at Evening Magazine a long time ago, and I remember walking up to her desk, I don't know if you remember, but I was like, can you look at my contract for TFC? And I remember you flipped over, you were going, this is it? And I'm like, yeah, it's like 2 pages long, but you know. And I always wanted to tell you this story because when I was in Hawaii, my parents, that was like in the 90s, or mid-90s, and I think maybe you just started at Cron, I think. And my parents sent me, I think you were on the cover of Filipinas magazine. My parents sent me that, and they were like, look, there's a Filipina on TV, you know? And then my dad was one of those old Filipino guys that would hang out at the mall and playing checkers at Ceremony, and they would talk, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, yeah, you know that there's the Malou in the TV, and then my dad was like, well, you know, my daughter's on the TV too. And they were like, yeah, okay, whatever. And they were like, oh, well, yeah, there was another girl, her name is Fresca, and she's doing this on TV. And he's like, that's my daughter. That's my daughter. That's what I had moved back. And then he pulled out his ID, and he was all like, that's Fresca Griarte. That's my last name in my ID. That's the same. And I was like, oh my gosh. But you know, and it was when I finally got to meet Malou, I was actually very, very excited because you know, I was like, wow, she's a Filipina. She's doing this, and you know, so it's really nice to be amongst like everybody here, and hoping that we can carry the torch as broadcasters for everyone here that paved the way before us. And
Well, you should really be thanking me, because I hired Malou
thank
as
you,
a
Mickey.
broadcaster.
Oh, you did. Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
So, I mean, I could talk about it for, you know, going on and on, but yeah, it's definitely, the landscape is changing.
Absolutely, yes. And I told you Mickey was responsible for a lot of our successes here today, right, Malou? All right, so Lady Ray. I just want to start with that first. How did you get the name Lady Ray?
Well, first off, I remember coming into radio and saying, all these people, these are not their names. These are not these people's names. Because I hung around a lot of DJs, right? And I kept throwing stuff around, and I looked at my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and I was like, we got to come up with something. Like, I can't just be Raina. Like, that's cool, but it's not there. So we were throwing stuff around, and he goes, you should just go Lady Ray. And I was like, I keep it ladylike. I do. That fits. And so I built a whole brand around it, had liners, had every artist that came into the studio say keep it ladylike. And so it just turned into its own thing. And so it was just my kind of reminder to the women around me and the young women coming up that we have to be ladylike. Like, and when I say that, I mean, I'm not saying you have to have your pinky up all the time and you have to curtsy and all that. That's great. But look out for the lady next to you. Let's not be catty. Let's not be, this spot is for me and only for me. If I'm coming in here, I'm bringing about 5 other women with me. So that's what it was about, was really integrity, respect for yourself and for others. And so it just kind of encompassed me. So that's where that came from.
Super important and well said, because Marcia, perhaps you can elaborate about this a little bit here. I know starting very young and going into the industry, it's almost as you always want another woman to be your friend, but instead you become a little, I don't want to say combative, but very competitive with one another. Have you ever felt that, Marcia?
Well, you know, this is an interesting little story. For when I started, I was hired by KTVU, Channel 2. I was there, incidentally, when they put the two, famous two. We thought it was so ugly. But it's lasted, When they put me on the air, the station got more angry letters from women. They thought that our voices were terrible, our manner was terrible, that we were overstepping and talking over the man. And it was so interesting that women couldn't support women in those days. I'm talking 1976. Women's movement had to not just fight the system, but also had to persuade women that there wasn't just going to be one who was going to be the star, that everybody could join in once one got in. But instead, what happened is they felt very competitive, and women did not like to see women move up. And I give you one other example. At the station that was so successful, KGO, before Mickey got there, there was a man named Ed McLaughlin who was quite a star in radio. And I was a secretary. That's how I got started. And a job came open as a producer for Jim Dunbar and the rest of the talk people. And I applied for it. And my boss, who was a lovely man, said, go for it, you'd be good. Except his boss, Ed McLaughlin, said to me, we cannot make you a producer. No women are in those jobs. The union will not permit a woman in the NABET union. And he said, the women who are other secretaries like you will be very upset that I gave you a leg up. And I said, the women are going to be upset. You're going to stop me from moving ahead because women are not going to support me? Then let them apply for the job too, and we'll all apply for the job. He said, no, just drop this. We're not going to have you. Long story short, I went to the union, and I asked the union, NABET, a guy named Lenny, I don't know his last name, but I owe him my career, actually. I went to him, I said, is it true that NABET will not let me in, that you don't want a woman producer, really? He said, that's ridiculous. I said, well, if you really mean that, I said, what if I write a petition and you have all the union guys sign it and let me come in as a producer? Lenny took that piece of paper and had every person sign. And I went back to Ed McLaughlin, and I give him credit for this. I showed him the paper. He said, whoa. He said, that's good. You don't take no for an answer. I said, and I'm not going to take the argument about women. That's a disgusting and ridiculous argument that pits women against women. I'm just not going to take it. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, you have the job. And that's how I got in. So that's what it was like in 1972.
Can I just say thank you? When they sent me an email about this event, I was like, oh my God, this is a great event. What if I could be a part of it? I thought he was calling me to consult on the event. And he asked me to be on the panel. And I was like, yes, of course. And the reason I was so excited is because how cool is it in your career to grow up listening to certain people, radio, television, watching them, their careers expand, and then you start working alongside them. And then you get invited into their studio, and then you get a title. Mm-hmm. So this, for me, is one of those moments where I can stop down and say, thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Fresca. I listened to Fresca growing up. Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Malou. Thank you, Renelle, who wish she could be here today. She's one of my people. She's my kid's bonus grandma. It's an amazing space to be in where you can watch someone do something, knock down barriers for us, and then come in, stomping in, and be able to continue to grow it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so honored to be here today.
That is so well said. It is really well said. Because, Marsha, I think I've even read your name in a couple of books, whether it was like Linda Ellerby's or Bill Schechner's, or I've seen your names, and it was the same thing when I went to KPIX. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in the same newsroom with Marsha? Really? And Bill Schechner, and and you've worked with, when you hear the names like Dave McElhatton and Dennis Richmond and Van Amberg, you got to think of Marsha as well. They put those men up there and they say their names, but Marsha was right there with each and every one of them.
Well, I will tell you a kind of a story. Van Amberg was not happy to have me on the air with him. And
Well, either was Harry Reasoner with Barbara Walters.
That's correct, but I have to give it a credit to Van Amberg. What happened with Van Amberg is he was very upset. He thought I hadn't paid my dues, even though I had been with Channel 9 and I had been at Channel 2. He felt like I hadn't paid my dues for years being a reporter, and that's how he felt. I mean, who knows what was in his mind. He didn't really talk to me for quite a time, maybe over a year, and then we had a strike. And NABIT was on strike, I was on the air. We had to do all the writing, everything. We were just in the newsroom, it almost felt like 24/7 to try to get newscasts on. And at the end of that period, he came into my office, he said, I really want to apologize. He said, you've really paid your dues. He said, I'm sorry that I didn't know how good you would be. So, I mean, that was, but it was interesting. Men did not want women. We had a fight to get in there, and we did. And the women who were with me, Valerie, I know she was on the air for CNN as Valerie Morris for years, but she was on the air sitting next to me as Valerie Coleman. She had to fight too. And she had to also fight being brown, because at that same time that there was affirmative action. Incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, the only reason women are on the air today is because of affirmative action, and black people, and Latinos, and everybody else. You can talk all you want about it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. It is fair. At that time, it was especially fair because we weren't given any chance. And the government did step in, which is what the reason for government is anyway, to help people raise themselves up. And it said, you have to hire some women, you have to hire some minorities. You can't have a television that goes into the whole country and not see who lives in our country. And because of that, I got hired. Not because they wanted to hire me, I got hired, and I didn't care. They can say I wasn't as good as the other guys. You can say, oh, she's a DEI. That's the same argument they're having today, DEI. Really? Come on. The people who get where they're going are good, and we were good. We were all very good, and we all deserved to be there, and we all learned, and we worked hard when we were there. That's all I have to say about that.
It's very interesting because I was going to mention DEI as well. I mean, my first job was the minority trainee. That was so there was a DEI right there, okay? But now, and without getting political or anything, I've always, I want to say well received by all genders, and for the first time ever this past week, that just in my entire career, which goes back to that 15-year-old girl at the radio station in Barstow, California, for the first time this week, I received an email from someone who all it said was, didn't even say, Dear Roberta or Hi Roberta, it just said, I hate Mexicans. And so I hit reply, and I said, why? And I didn't get a response back. But I'm wondering if this is feeding from other places. And of course, right? And this is why I believe when you talked about kind of like an infomercial before too, you have a Tesla on the White House lawn. And the president getting inside of it, oh, isn't this smell good? Look at all this room, it's got a computer inside. We need to draw the lines there, but not on who we are. The respect, when you see a president disrespecting another president, like from the Ukraine, do you think that influences other people to misbehave and act poorly? If the president could do it, I could do it. What do you think?
Well, it's what we're seeing here today is something I hope is over quickly, and that we never see anything like it again. I just want to throw in a commercial for myself here for a second. I started actually, an organization called the Bay Area Broadcast Skills Bank way back when. and it was for one purpose, to get women and minorities into the broadcast business. Believe it or not, women, we had to go out and find you. We had to go out and recruit you because we wanted women in broadcasting. When I got to KGO, we had a traffic director, continuity director, and what we used to call secretaries. That was it. When I left, they were in every single position in the building. And they made it a much, much better place.
If you were just looking for women, all you had to do is go find the ones who talked a lot. Right? As you were saying, Fresca, you know, my report cards, they always came back with, lovely daughter, but talks too much. Way too talkative. Yeah. Same, right? So I know a lot of you have some questions too, instead of me just asking all of them. Do we have one right over here? And if you don't mind, I'll try to stay out of everyone's way. Miranda Wilson.
I have two questions. So, Marcia, think about this one while I ask for, Lady Ray about how your previous profession helped your present profession. And then for Lady Ray, the 13 stations, how do you do that?
So I'm on air at KMEL, so I'm a part of the morning show. I report the traffic Monday through Friday. And actually, that's how I got my start. I was doing college radio at UC Berkeley, CalX, and I was doing news radio there, and I was like, this is fun. By the way, I think I also have a tape deck story, because I grew up around the music industry because my dad and my uncles were musicians, my grandfather too. And so we would always have music around, and so we had a tape deck, and we would pretend to do a radio station, take requests, all the things, right? So I knew it was there, and I would talk a lot. Got in trouble a lot for talking. And so once I got to college, they were like, hey, if you work for the college radio station, you get to travel with the football team, and they go to Hawaii. And I was like, sign me up. And so I went in for that reason, because I talk a lot, and I thought I was good at it. And so when I started doing college radio, they needed someone to cover news. And I was like, sure, I'll do it. And then I said, why stop here? I've been listening to KMEL, to Wild 94.9, to all these radio stations. Let me just reach out to people. And I reached out to the producer of the Chuy Gomez show at the time on KMEL. And I was like, I'm looking for an internship. What do I do? And he's like, come in. And so I came in, and from that day I started answering phones, working, doing all those things. And so I climbed my way up. Got to go in the studio, watch Miranda at work, and I was like, this is how she does it. Got to watch Renelle firsthand. And so I told myself, you have to be a sponge and soak up as much information, learn every piece of this, learn how to run the boards, learn how to edit, learn how to take a call from someone calling in from New York. I literally, because I was there in the morning show and there was nobody in the building except for the morning shows, if the lines went down, right? Because nowadays, we got Zoom, we got all these other options. If the ISDN line went down and Jay-Z couldn't call in to do his interview, I had to figure out how to do it. So I would call our engineer out of bed at 5 in the morning. I'm like, there's a light on that's not supposed to be on. I need you to walk me through this. And he would literally walk me through our rack room. Ray, take 2 steps to the right. Take 2 steps up, look to the third one down, press that button. This one button controls the entire, what? So I'd press the button, and there was Jay-Z on the line. So I say all that to say I've worked almost every facet of this, and my goal was to be able to do radio from my house and have children. And so I had my 2 kids, and then this thing came along called the pandemic. And they were like, hey, build a studio at home, because you got to be able to do this from the house. And I was like,
You're like, I'm there.
YES. And so we built the studio, and I haven't been back in the building. And my goal was to be able to do local radio and then be able to be on at other stations. And I had been advocating it for a while. I'm like, come on, I can do this, I can do this. And they were like, hey, there's a spot on our throwback station. I go, excuse me, throwback? You mean all the records I grew up with? From the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s? Oh, this is about to be the fun part, the extra fun part of my job. So they put me on in 12 markets throughout the country. So I'm on in Texas, I'm on in New Orleans, I'm on in Virginia, I'm in all these places. This sounds amazing and exciting. And when they said you're on in Hawaii, I was like, do they need me to come there? So,
Market check?
yeah, so it's awesome. That part of it is really really cool because it's a night show and I get to pre-record it and I get to just be fun and talk about all the nostalgia. The part of it that I don't like though is what I don't know. I don't know if I'm taking someone's job in that market. I don't know if they're picking up a station and flipping it, because I just get liners. I get, hey, we want you to cut all these, we want you to blah, 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 and I'm just going down. Wake up in the morning with such and such and such. You know, you do it. And I had to do it because I had a newborn baby and my son was 2. And then between ages 2 and 3, during the pandemic, my son was diagnosed with autism. So I'm juggling all of this and being a radio voice at the same time, and you just do it. And so I figured it out to a science to where I can knock out my breaks, I can be pre-recording, and I can cut back to the live show, check in with Sana. Sana will throw it to me, and I turn that receiver off, and then I go back to my recording, and I knock it out, and then I go to my email, and I look, what do I have to cut today? And I have to make a lot of notes. My desk is like a Post-it, like if they have a Post-it sponsorship, Presente, that's me. But yeah, it's a lot. What'd you say? No one can do that but a woman. Say that again.
It's a lot, but you still have the passion for it.
Yes.
You still have the love for it, and
Yes.
that's why we do it, right? Yeah, because if you didn't have that love or passion, it would show.
Yeah.
It really would. Okay, question. First of all, I got to say, Mr. Clark Reed here, did you work in radio? No?
Sometimes.
Because I was going to say, are you the one who called me up when I was at KNTV back in the 80s and dared me to sleep at the Winchester Mystery House on Halloween night? No. Okay. There was a Clark Reed who did that to me, and to this day I'm still the only stupid person who's ever slept at the Winchester Mystery House. Don't do it. It was a nightmare.
From a wheat field in Kansas.
Okay. So you know all about tornadoes.
I was a certified storm chaser, so yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Every time tornadoes came out, the family went in the basement. I went out to Rails Hill and got hailed on and reported live and direct on the tornadoes.
What was the biggest tornado or the most dramatic that you ever covered?
Well, when we had 5 in one day, that was dramatic. And also driving back to Colorado with my daughter and her family. And there were 2 of them on the ground north of Interstate 70. And I had her tape it with my camera, and the funny part, right in the middle of it, she yells, "Drive faster, Daddy!" right in the middle of the recording. But that was pretty exciting, having your whole family in there, and you're going, because they don't know. Tornadoes can go anywhere within the cell. They don't just go in one direction. They can vary any direction in the cell, and you can be in trouble in a heartbeat.
Have you seen the movie Tornado? Twister, the movie Twister?
Yeah.
Did you laugh really hard too? I laughed too. It was just so entertaining, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, you just have to go along for the ride, right? Okay, more questions here. Anybody questions here? Question to Marcia? Who? Oh, you do. Oh, yeah, your question to Marcia. Yeah. You got the answer? Can you repeat the question?
How did your previous profession help your present profession?
Well, first of all, my previous profession wasn't just in news. I had one of the really crazy careers. I kept going back. I was living in LA. I would go from news into entertainment, news into entertainment. I ran Carol Burnette's company for 10 years. I worked with Norman Lear for a while to create a show called Good Evening, He Lied. He came up with that title. It was about the news. And so, I've had a lot of, I worked at NPR for a while, interviewing. One of the things that I thought I was good at was interviewing. And Jerry Brown here at KGO, I once had him on, and I must have known that I was going to be a therapist at that time, because he came on and politicians always, you can ask them anything, and they will talk about what they want to talk about. Oh, yes, well, I have a bill that blah, 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 and all this vomit comes out, and you're trying to get in with something important. And he sat down, and I knew he was a master of this, and before anything, I said to him, you're running for governor again, and that means that the people are going to have to hire you again. And if you actually came to my office and I was going to hire you, I would say to you, can you tell me something about yourself? And he said, what? And I thought, yes, tell us about what you think of yourself, who you are. And he could not. It was so interesting. He had to shift it to something in the environment. But when you ask why I became a therapist, that's why, because I'm interested in people. I was always a good interviewer. I never looked, I would make questions, I would do all the research ahead of time. It went in, but then, for whatever reason, I listened with a third ear. I didn't think of what's the next thing. I said, take your chances. I would have to prime myself to believe that I would come up with something by listening. Now that takes a little bit of courage, because if you have your questions in front of you and you can just go blah, 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 you know, but it's never an interesting interview. And so I learned to wait and listen and find something that would lead me somewhere else. And they always became much better interviews. As a therapist, the listening is so enervating, because you have to listen, and listen then to yourself about what you're thinking. What is it bringing up in me? And then take the chance to have an insight or to ask another question that will unravel the onion. You know, therapy is like taking the onion peel just off. That's why it takes so long. Those peels are very thin. And so listening is really what I learned from my work as a journalist.
And that is brilliant, because in television and in radio, we talk. We don't always listen. And I do want to tell you, I did listen to her question. I just forgot it. Because
But I understand.
Because I didn't take my Prevagen today, okay? All right, Rosie. Okay, who has a question? Oh, do you, Jackie, be in the house?
I wanted to ask, in general, and this question is to Mickey, how did women react to women on the radio when they first came on?
Never had an objection, not once.
Wow.
And you say it's surprising. Why do you say that?
It's surprising because I was one of those women. And I don't know if Mickey ever got a letter. I used to get letters all the time. And it was interesting because I, like Marcia, felt like women, you know, should rally around other women and we should be our best advocates. But that was not the case. Because I can remember getting some really pithy letters, and they were from women. So, so Mickey, love you much, but that surprises me.
They were afraid to write them to me.
I know, I figured that. But I did get a few. It was coming into KGO in 1984, following Jan Black, was really difficult because she was very high profile, and I came from doing a show called Sex Talk. And so, yeah, it was fun. And then I had to come in and be a news person, which I had news background, so it wasn't difficult. But it was very challenging to fit into the afternoon news, very intimidating, very challenging. And so and of course, Mickey, I always thank you for hiring me, I think. But it was a rough go in the beginning. And it wasn't so much that I was a woman, because I think people like Marcia had blazed that trail, and Belva, of course. But it was because of the nature of the kind of work that we had to do at KGO. And you talk about listening, Marcia, we did interviews all the time. You had to listen. The follow-up has to be honest, or it's gonna really not make sense to what you're saying. If you're in another whole space than the interviewer or the interviewee, then you're not in the interview at all. And it comes out that way on the radio or television, depending on what you're doing.
Wow, Roberta, thank you. This is not a question. This is just a statement and how I've always lived. If you want the right man for the job, get a woman.
And I've always heard, if you want something done, ask a busy person. Right? Because they'll bring it on. Now, you mentioned Belva here, and I want to come on over here to Rita Wilson, because you've got some news to share with us, right? Oh, I was going to duck underneath the camera. Hi. Okay. So, yeah. 64 degrees outside right now. It's really nice. Okay. So Rita, tell us what's going on.
First off, it's Rita Williams.
Oh, what did I say?
Rita Wilson.
Oh gosh, did I
Rita
really?
Wilson is married to Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I got to take that Prevagen, as I said.
Mistaken for her all the time, at least by name. But I knew that Rosie would say something about Belva. I mean, how can you talk about First in the Bay Area without Belva Davis? And I had the privilege of working with her when I first moved here in 1978 on the old newsroom, Closer Look Evening Edition at Channel 9, and then to work with her husband, Bill Moore, as a cameraman at Channel 2 for the next 25 years once I moved over there. So Belva and I used to laugh that Belva was his nighttime wife and I was Bill's daytime wife. But just to say that Belva was a mentor not just to African American women, which she definitely is, but she was to all women. She was the first African American woman anchor on the west side of the Mississippi, if I have that right. And she is truly a legend, and she's written a book about herself many years ago. But George Osterkamp, who used to be a news director at KQED, some of you remember him, then went on to CBS, he probably knows her better than anybody else, and he has kept all this video. And George has been trying to do a documentary on Belva, and we would like for it to be done before she dies. And as you know, she has serious Alzheimer's. And I've been trying to help him raise money for it, and he's still working at it. And Sweet John agreed that he will send out a little 5-minute video that they did on CBS Morning News, Sunday morning, CBS Sunday morning.
I believe that's with Jane Pauley.
Yep, you're right, with Jane Pauley. But it was Bill Whitaker who saw Belva as a mentor, and Bill, as you know, is now in 60 Minutes. And Bill has agreed to narrate, and he's done some of the interviews already. And he did this 5-minute sort of preview of the documentary, and it's been 2 years now, and we still haven't raised enough money. You've got to change over a lot of that old film and stuff, and that's where the big expenses are. So John has agreed that he will send out to all of you the link I'm going to send to the morning news segment and how you can donate if you would like to, or know any heavy hitters that might want to honor this amazing Belva Davis. So anyway, that was my spiel. I've listened to all of you. I started out in 1969 when I graduated, and Marcia and I found out recently that we are birthday sisters. We have the same birthday, a few years apart, but a couple. And just listening to all of this, 69, I couldn't get hired as a reporter. I went to work for a congressman in Washington and then became a Westinghouse management trainee in 1972 and went to Baltimore, then to San Antonio, and then came out here in 78. So I had 6 years of TV experience when I went to KQED, and then Fred Zinder hired me at KQED in 1980. So we all have this long history and many battle scars, and nothing makes me prouder when people say, "Don't you resent women today on the air with all you went through?" And I say, it makes it all worth it. All those stabs in the back, that therapy you had to go to survive and come back to work the next day. It is other women and you wonderful young women that I see up there. And Mickey Luckoff, I always heard nice things about you, even though I never worked for you. I always thought you would have been a great boss, because I didn't always have the greatest GM. So thank you. I appreciate all of you. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that was wonderful. That was beautiful. All right. So Fresca, I want to ask you, what do you think about radio and its progression? We've seen some radio stations fold their doors, close their doors and turn off the signal. Where do you think the future is with radio?
Yeah, we were actually just talking about this.
Well, you both can answer this question.
Yeah. It's really hard to say because we feel that it's killing the personality. We talk about PPM and how, you know, you want to capture these quarter hours and all this, and the best way to do it is to just do it in 8 seconds. You know, and I remember when we first started, there were like 30-second ramps to a song or intros, and or you can stop down in the middle of the hour and talk about whatever. And now it's like, at this time you're going to say this, at this time you're going to say that, at this time you're going to say this, and you got to do it in 15 seconds. And I guess to answer your question, I think that there's going to be few people doing a lot more things, especially with technology and where it's going. And they're automating a lot. And it's sad, I think, where it's going from when when I first got into the industry in the early 90s and seeing where it's going. But it's either you ride the wave or you drown in it, and that's with anything. And it's really tough to see, because you hear a lot of your friends, oh yeah, I heard that this radio company just laid off 300 people today. Oh yeah, so you're wondering where are our friends in the country that are getting affected, and how else are they condensing? We have a cluster of, I think it's 7 markets, Bonneville, and I want to say that there's our Utah Salt Lake location is handling all of our traffic. Is that right, Sue? Right? It's handling all of our traffic. And we're like, what? And I mean, you're on 13 stations, so it's like, you may be.
And I'm really trying to. I come from just an optimistic. That's just me. I'm just a positive person. I try to find the value in everything, and one of my mentors is here today, Jerry Dove, and one of the cool things. One of the great things that Jerry really enhanced in me was this idea of community give back. And he would bring tours in of students. And so when Jerry left, I was like, I want to do that. Like, can I, and I was already helping him with it while he was there. And so that's what I get to do, is I get to invite high school students, college students, young folks that are actually excited to be in media and broadcasting, and hear from them. Like, are you guys still listening to radio? How do you listen to radio? How are you ingesting media? And so that's the hopeful part of me, is that there are still young people coming in that want to be in the building, that want to work in radio, that want to have these jobs. But the difference is, and we saw this, is how it completely pivoted. Radio, when I was growing up, was like, you had to have theater of the mind. You listened and you thought, okay, this person's sitting in a room. Is it dark? Are they, you had a whole vision of what you thought that person looked like. And you maybe got to see them if you got like a DJ card, right? If you got one of those bio cards that they signed at a post-up event or whatever. That might have been the only chance you got to see that person. And now, when I got into radio, it was like, oh no, you got to come with clothes on. You can't come here with your sweats on. You got to come with your full, how you want to be presented to the world, because video started coming in. Digital started coming in.
Mickey was there. He ought to tell you what he sees as the radio landscape right now, because he has been there, and he also still has some stations that he's involved with.
Yes, great.
And they're all live and local.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that small town radio is doing well,
right,
as opposed to the major markets, which are unfortunately owned by 4 companies. 3 of the 4 are in bankruptcy. That's the sad part.
Yeah. And I think that's
He said about that, because the other night I was driving home after the 11 o'clock newscast, and I saw a traffic accident, and I tried to call it into KCBS, and the gentleman on there at the time said, Roberta, I got to get back to you. I'm covering Los Angeles traffic right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but the accident is here, right here, right now. So,
there is an argument to be made. Again, I don't mean to be on my soapbox today, but there is an argument to be made that the lack of local news has really created what we're seeing now in the news, which is, I don't even know, 4 ideas, 4 stations that just, or for companies that really don't even tell you what's going on in your own community. And that's terrible because the local news is a microcosm of what's happening in other places in the country. And so if we don't have local news, what do we have? And you have a terrible newspaper. The LA Times used to be great. It's now a rag. And people will say the argument against me is that, oh, well, look at all the blogs and look at all the information. You have so many channels who are telling you this and that and the other. Well, most of it is not even vetted. We don't know if it's true. In fact, facts are malleable, whoever that woman was who said it during the other campaign. Conway. So we don't know. Yeah, alternative facts. Well, now we're living in a world of alternative news. And you have to be really smart to know what's actually going on. And I would say my old feeling that the Americans are really smart and they'll figure it out, by now, I don't think that's so much.
Marcia, come to Kankakee, Illinois. We do everything local. You know everything that's going on in that town at any time.
I love that.
I love
that.
Kankakee.
I love
Kankakee many a time.
Kankakee, Illinois.
Yes, yes.
I have a question for Mickey, but at first I just wanted to make a statement. Is this on? Yeah, it's on. Okay.
Don't you know how to use a microphone?
I don't, actually, sorry. So in 1979, when I came to San Francisco, I was hired by a woman, Pat Palmer, at KYA. She was my first female boss. Later, I went on to work for Vicki Liviakis at KFRC. One of my dearest friends in the business was Joe Interrante. The three women who taught me, the three people who taught me the most in my career were all women. And I've had really great bosses, men and women both, but the women were the ones who were the best mentors, the best teachers, the ones who were the most nurturing of my talent and gave me direction and taught me how to write and taught me how to be a good storyteller. And, you know, I'm the storyteller I am today because of Vicki Liviakis. I mean, she taught me how to do that. So my question is to you, Mickey. You know, when you were talking earlier about getting to KGO and the only people, the women on the staff were secretaries, et cetera. Later, you know, you had anchors, you had writers, you had producers who were women. You had Trish Robbins, who ran she was the executive producer for the talk shows. How did that happen internally? Did you make a conscious decision to get your managers to follow that path, or did it happen organically? I mean, how did you do that?
I expected that to be the first question today.
It came from the reporter.
Yeah, no, I can't really say that there was a conscious effort. I mean, we welcomed women into the business for sure. And as I said, we had to do a lot of recruiting to find women and minorities. But we always look for the best people. And one quick story, I had a program, you'll love this. I had a program director who we were screening for, I think it was a promotion director. And he said, well, there's 2 resumes. What do you think of this? He says, we can get the woman cheaper. I said, don't ever tell me that again. He didn't last too much longer either. No, we really looked for the best people. And frankly, women were a very refreshing part that came into our industry and really helped make KGO what it was. And we were on top of this market for 35 consecutive years. And it was really a joy to behold, except women, this is where I needed Marcia's other profession. Negotiating with talent for their contracts was one of the most difficult things I ever did. And at first I didn't want them to get agents. I objected to agents. And then after a while I said, bring on the agents, it's a lot easier.
I do have a funny story. I have to tell this. Channel
Am I going to like this one?
Yeah, you'll like it.
Okay.
I think. It's just funny. It's just history. It's history. At Channel 2, Cox owned it at that time, and I was the anchor. That was my very first job on the air. And in those days, I don't know whether they do it anymore. They did a lot of research. They had Magid and all of these places doing research. Who's good, who's not, who's good, who's not. And I happened to have a mole in one of the places who told me that I was kind of hot at the moment. And yeah, not that kind of hot. My wonderful, oh yeah, in those days, my wonderful co-anchor George Redding. I don't know, do you remember him? He was a fine. This is a man who, when I first came on the air with him as a first female, made it so easy. He was the most loving, decent, darling, and taught me and helped me, and it was having a wonderful human by my side to sort of give me an easy landing in that first job, because he knew how tough it was for the first woman. But when they fired him, and our whole newsroom went to bat for George, that we thought it was terrible that he was being fired. And they wanted to hire a guy from LA whose name I won't mention, but I will tell you that he's the kind of guy that would read a teleprompter, and they had his name on it twice, and he said, "Good evening, I'm blah, blah. Good evening, I'm blah, blah." Because he was, and that's who they were going to hire. They actually did hire him, and they told me that I was going to be the second chair, the co-anchor. He was going to be the anchor. I don't know where I got the balls, everybody, but I said to the manager, if you hire him as the main lead after I've been here for 3 years, because he happens to have a package and I don't, I will leave. And I will leave and go. And they didn't believe me, and I stayed out, and I told them I'm not going to work under I feel ashamed that you would put me as second after I've helped raise the ratings. You let go a perfectly wonderful man, George Redding, which also upset me, so I'm not going to be there. They made me the anchor. That was at Channel 2. And that was a very tough thing, because when I went to Channel 7, Valerie will remember this, there was an argument about that same thing. And I was willing to work with a man named Steve Davis and I said, I'm happy to do it. He's one day, me the next, but not to be the second. And I thought that was a fight for women. And I think back, I haven't thought about that in years. I think back to that and I wonder, who was I?
I'm sorry to just jump in like this, but that brings me to a very interesting conundrum, because what you did would have been considered bitchy.
Yeah.
Or she's not cooperative.
Right.
Or,
Right.
And that's the reputation that some women had. Even though what you did was advocacy, it wasn't seen as that. Do you ladies who are on the end in the business now, are you facing similar type issues? Because I know the difference between what we did in talk and news. Radio, music radio is very difficult for women. Speak to that.
Yeah, no, and I think that was always kind of my tight wire, was because if a man did it, it was like, oh, he's about business, he's stern, he's this. If I do it, I'm the word with the B on the front, or I'm a diva and hard to work with. And so it's like, and this is something innately that I think women have, is just the ability to kind of finesse things and fight the battles that are important and stand up for the moments that are important. And so I dealt with it, and there were just instances where I was like, well, they're just gonna think I'm a bitch, and that's just gonna have to be it. That's just gonna have to be it. And you either, you just figure out a way to break through those boundaries and maintain relationships that are important and don't burn certain bridges, and figure out who the allies are in those instances. And preparing for today's event, it really caused me to look back and think about those bridges And every pivotal moment in my career where I was offered a new position, hired on, was by a woman. My first paid position in radio was Ramona Gutierrez, hired me in promotions. Next position, getting put on air, Stacey Cunningham. First woman to be the PD at KME, and then put me on air. Katie Wilcox, our manager, our GM, our marketing president, introduced this idea of having a new contract. Like, all these pivotal moments were women. And that's another thing too, is not only having the backbone to do it, but to have the backbone to be like, hold on, I'm not getting paid my value, right? And that takes a lot of a lot of guts.
I think I came out of the 60s. And the 60s women were tough.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, we really had, in the women's movement, I think we had a long road, and we were willing to be bra-burning bitches.
Yeah. I come from those women. I come from strong. My grandmother is 94. And when I would have those moments where I would just want to I'll take this little job and whatever, I'll just take whatever they throw me. I'd be like, wait a minute, my spine would feel uncomfortable in that position. And I would hear my grandmother's voice. I would hear my mom's mom, my other grandmother. These are strong, like, they fought for me to even be in these rooms and in these instances. And now that I'm here, I can't just shy back and scurry off. I have to keep that voice and be that bra burning.
But wouldn't you agree that, as I was talking about George Redding, there were men that were so instrumental in helping. And so I don't want men to feel like you weren't there.
Oh, no, they were.
You were there. If you hadn't been there, we would have never made it. If you hadn't listened
He's
to
right
us.
there. He's right there.
There you are. I don't know you, but I thank you.
All right, I'm sorry, but we have time for only one more question, and then if you'd like to take some pictures with our esteemed panel here, we can do that. But right
This is for Marcia. I was at KGO in the 45 years ago. I was anchor before Rosie. But before that, I was at KSFO doing sports commentaries, which was kind of rare in the early 70s. And I had an encounter with Marcia. She took an interest in my fledgling career. She did with the few women that were in the market at that time. And she called me every once in a while with a comment on how I was doing. And one day, she called after I'd done a commentary, and I said, well, how was it? She said, you sound like shit. And yes, and I waited, and she said, because you're listening to your voice, get rid of the headphones. And it was the best advice I ever got. And then I had a 50-year career, and I think I've always credited you with giving me that advice. It was the best advice I ever had. So thank you, 50 years later.
That is beautiful, and I think that's a wonderful way of ending, because if any of you would like to say, what is a positive note, Miss Optimistic over here, but Mickey, what would you like to say to our esteemed guests and audience here as we move forward and leave this room today?
There are better days ahead.
That's beautiful. That is really, we need to hear that. And there's cloudier days ahead too. Increasing clouds tomorrow will lead to rain tomorrow night. And we've got rain in the forecast for your morning commute on Monday, then again on Wednesday, but other than that, it's okay. Spring officially arrives on Thursday.
Can I say one more thing? And to go off of that, we're going to get those better days with events like these.
Yes.
Opportunities where we can actually talk to each other, where we can see each other eye to eye. Don't
And
get
support.
me wrong, I'm here.
And motivate.
And motivate each other. I'm here for the digital world. Don't get me wrong. I know it's coming. AI is there. Embrace it, but we can't do it without having these interactions. Like, for her to say that you called her, picked up the phone and called her, like, we have to do those things in 2025 and moving forward. Mm-hmm. Not just an email, not just a social media DM, whatever. Like, actually call people and interact with people and really just reinvigorate that tie.
Believe in each other too.
Yeah, because we also were talking about how a lot of, it seems like the generation before us very much involved with each other, very much would speak to each other and really collectively come together with events like this. And our generation hasn't done that. And so when we look in the room today, it's, we really want to help. You all have helped us in wanting to motivate our peers to continue to evolve and get better, and also remain tight-knit because of how quickly the industry is moving.
That's fantastic. Thank you all for your time here today, Marsha, Mickey, Fresca, and also Lady Ray. What is your real name?
Raina.
Raina. Oh, I like that too. The queen. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Any last words? Otherwise, we'll take some photographs if you'd like to do that. And I really want to thank all of you for spending your Saturday morning and early Saturday afternoon together. John, final words?
Thank you so much for coming today, everybody. I hope you like our new venue. We'd love to get your feedback on anything that you have to say about the venue. And our great panelists, Marsha and Mickey and Fresca and Lady Ray. I want to thank the entire audio video team. There's Dave Bellici, there's Ricky Rubin, there's Steve Cushman. Where does Steve Garaventa go? And I know I'm missing someone. Who am I missing, guys? Yeah, I mentioned Steve. Okay, great. Well, thank you to them for running everything today. And to Rosie Allen, who is my partner in a lot of the programming that we're doing for these events. If you have any feedback about the programming, you can always shoot me an email or a text. Thanks for coming. Thank you.